Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Authentic Podcast with Justin Doulard. And thank you for tuning in to another episode. And now, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. Another genuine conversation with a unique individual. It's time!
All right, everybody, welcome back. I got my old professor here who is a criminal defense attorney, Mr. Ward Johnson. Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Ward, why don't you just go ahead and tell us a little about yourself and explain to somebody who may not know.
Well, I was born in Grand Forks, primarily grew up in Bismarck, and then graduated from high school, Bismarck High School, and then came to UND, got a bachelor's degree here in English, master's degree in English, Juris Doctorate in English, just banged through all of them. And then just been practicing law. At the same time I was doing all that, I was also a member of the Army Guard in North Dakota, which was an excellent decision. That's a great organization. And so pretty much hung around North Dakota, except when the country sent me somewhere worldwide. And so I was deployed 3 times overseas. Desert Storm was my first one, and then 2 times to Guantanamo Bay.
What'd you do in Guantanamo Bay exactly?
A number of different things. Started out as a board member for the administrative review boards, which at the time during the Bush administration, every detainee in Guantanamo Bay was entitled to an annual review of their detention status. And so there was always work being done to make sure there was no misinformation, cross-information, wrong guy stuff. You know, the 3rd year that somebody was there, we found out that this wasn't the right guy, sent him home, stuff like that. And then combatant status review tribunals for the 14 high-value detainees, which included Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Ramzi bin al-Shibh, Abu Zubaydah, the Belly bombers, the USS Cole bombers, East Coast Sleeper Cell. I was the 06 in charge of the team that put all those guys in Guantanamo Bay. So it was called the Tiger Team, and I provided overhead cover as a senior lawyer, but supervised 05s, the lieutenant colonels that were in charge. Like I had one lieutenant colonel that was in charge of the team to put the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed case together, another 05 in charge of the team that put the Ramzi bin al-Shibh case together, and so on. And so when they would come up on a full stop where they were trying to get information from one of the alphabet agencies and couldn't seem to shake loose something, I'd get involved with the upper echelons and get them the information they needed. So then I was the president of combatant status tribunal boards. I was president of administrative review boards, or presiding officer, I guess they called those. My final 3 years, I was the director of the Office of Military Commissions, and my job at the Office of Military Commissions was making sure that the war crimes tribunals down in Guantanamo ran smoothly. So we had a $60-some million annual budget, and my responsibility was to make sure that the Office of Prosecution had office space, and the Office of Defense had office space, and had the employees and resources that they needed to do their job. I also was responsible for the Clerk of Court's office and the Convening Authority's office, and getting everybody their resources and putting budgets together and hiring and firing. Like I'm the guy, the senior guy that decides within the agency if you fire somebody, that type of stuff. So it was more babysitting. I didn't practice a lot of law that 3 years.
Sure. So, but the guys under you, are they representing the prisoners of war there? Is that how that works?
Oh, well, there were lawyers there that worked in the Office of Prosecution that worked for a one-star general, and there were officers that worked for the defense, and they worked for, I believe, when I was there it was an 06, but after I left, they bumped him up to a one-banger too. And my job was to resource them and make sure that they had paralegals and associate attorneys and get them their security clearances and make sure that everything was provided for them to do their jobs.
I know there was a lot of controversy at one point in time with Guantanamo Bay, and I think you talked about that with a local paper. What was that about? I mean,
well, Guantanamo Bay came on the heels of the Abu Ghraib scandal, which really was a scandal. There was malfeasance and misfeasance on the part of senior United States Army military officers, namely Brigadier General Janice Karpinski, I believe her name was, who was just derelict in her duties. And so what happened was that got cross-pollinated to Guantanamo Bay for no apparent reason. People forget that that Guantanamo Bay was run by the Defense Department. And the whole time I was there, I never saw any breach of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. If I had, I would have blown a whistle, raised a flag, because by training I was a defense attorney. You know, I'm the Constitution and protecting those that can't protect themselves is near and dear to my heart. So if I had thought that in my operational area that the CIA was doing something they shouldn't have done, or the FBI, who were both down there, or any military member for all that matter, it would not have gone on. And I encouraged everyone that worked in my sphere of influence to report anything that they thought didn't seem right. So from my point of view, from what I saw, and I was at a pretty high level, and I saw nothing, and I tried to do my best to be at the wrong place at the right time if I thought I smelled something, and just never did see anything.
And you spent how long there? So was it 6 months at a time, a year at a time? Or?
No, they were 1 year tours. I lived in Guantanamo Bay for 2 years.
Straight?
From 2005 to 2006 and 2008 to 2009, 1 year tours.
What's it like living there?
Oh, it was wonderful.
Really?
Oh, it was awful, or awesome. The base is run by the Navy. It's beautiful. It's in the Caribbean. Keep that in mind. Jamaica is 100 miles away.
Okay.
It's on the complete far east coast of the island of Cuba, and it's a tropical paradise.
So you had some good times when you were not working, I guess.
Yeah. Did a lot of diving, did a lot of physical training, but just it was like 92 every day.
Yeah.
And dry.
Sure. So the guy that you guys had for 3 years that was the wrong guy, what happens there? You just cut him loose and say, I'm sorry? Or
well, he wasn't not a criminal.
But he was not the guy you thought he was.
He was just a drug dealer and not a war criminal. So we just sent him back to let his country deal with him.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bounce around quite a bit. I'm kind of scatterbrained as it is, and I've got some different topics, but
yeah, go ahead.
And I'm notoriously bad for taking notes, but and by the way, keep your mic just a little closer.
Sure.
Yeah, pretty good.
Okay.
So, the one thing I did write down that I for sure wanted to talk about with you is at what point, because I was born in 1990.
Okay.
So I'm still a little young, but
okay.
At what point in our history did private corporations start having the authority and ability to run prisons? And then can you elaborate on that at all, on your thoughts on how that works?
Prisons, jails is a function primarily of the government, but the government can privately contract out pretty much any of their ministerial duties, and they do it as a matter of course, and have done that ever since I can remember. And as far as I know, the taxpayers are the ones that benefit that, because if a private company can provide a service, which they normally do, governments are notoriously very poor at being stewards of tax dollars. So whenever you privatize something, you usually get more bang for the buck, and I'm a proponent of that as long as they have proper oversight.
So do you think the private corporations running prison is a good thing or a bad thing?
No, it's a good thing as long as they are properly overseen.
Do you think they're being properly overseen now, or is that an issue? It just seems a little weird that I could get on my phone on my Robinhood app and buy stock in a company that has control over prison, because I think it correlates to back when you mentioned in class business law about the war on drugs and how it's kind of been faulty. Yeah. So would those two not kind of correlate?
Well, the war on drugs, I think I might have said in class, in my opinion, has been an abject failure.
That started in the 70s, or is that right?
What would it have been? The Crime Control Act that made pot illegal, I think, was the start of it. Prior to that, we hardly had any controlled substances, and look what it's done to our society. Just based on what's your drug of choice. So if your drug of choice was alcohol, man, you're golden in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely.
So people don't like to hear this, but this is the truth. You grow sugar beets in the state of North Dakota, and they turn that into sugar. Sugar is used in the distilled spirits industry. Okay? Now jump to Afghanistan or Colombia. Well, what do their farmers grow? Colombia, it's coca leaves. In Afghanistan, it's poppy flowers. Okay? Or Mexico, marijuana. I've never done a murder case in my 33 years as an attorney where alcohol wasn't a major contributing factor. I've never done a murder case where somebody was hopped up on marijuana, or no, there are drug deals that have gone bad, but primarily murder cases are when someone has completely taken leave of their senses and gone berserk, and you see that a lot with alcohol. You don't see it so much with pot.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that too with a lot of domestic disputes as well. It's usually always alcohol involved.
Yeah.
Or 9 times out of 10.
And that probably separates me from the Republican Party for the most part, because they're very, very prohibitionistic in their approach to controlled substances, and I think it's just a huge waste of human life.
Do you think marijuana will be legal on a national level in the next 10, 20 years, or do you think we're still pretty far away from?
I hope it is, and I am not a pot smoker. I've never been a pot smoker, but I think if somebody wants to smoke pot, they should be able to smoke pot.
Same as you would go to a bar.
Yeah,
drink like that. So.
Well, you look at other examples of societies, the way they handle controlled substances. Scandinavia comes to mind. You want to be a heroin addict, go get a license. They're going to regulate you.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I was going to jump to something next. I couldn't remember what exactly I was thinking about. I had some friends with some questions, so I'll kind of look at those while we bounce off that.
Absolutely.
One of my friends said, ask questions, anything Epstein related. So I haven't followed as much as I should, but what are your thoughts on that case in a short window grasped? Because you could talk about it for hours probably, but
I guess I could bring it all down to Jeffrey Epstein didn't commit suicide.
You don't think he did?
I absolutely do not.
Okay, so what happened?
I do not. He was murdered.
He was murdered by people that paid for that in the prison, or he...
pick your whatever you want. If it was a suicide, you wouldn't have had the security cam failures and the missing footage. That only happens when there's a conspiracy, because Jeffrey Epstein didn't have control of that, and we would have known. We would have been able to see who went in, who came out, who saw him, who didn't see him. Why is that gone?
That's pretty easy. Yeah. I've watched a little bit about it. I just, for some reason, I haven't followed it as much as I normally would, other conspiracy theories and whatnot. But I do know that's the popular opinion is he didn't kill himself.
Yeah, and then I think there's that Dr. Bodden. I've read some things that he said about the hyoid bone, that when you see the hyoid bone, the way he described it, that's a murder. So I'm not a forensic pathologist, but I tend to listen to those who are.
Yeah. I know we talked about it briefly in class and then on our own time too, but I know you followed the Aaron Hernandez case a little bit, the football player from the Patriots.
Okay.
Do you think he killed himself?
Refresh my recollection.
So Aaron Hernandez got charged with double murder when he was playing for the Patriots, and then he got found innocent of one of those, and then he was also involved in another murder in Boston that he got recharged for.
Okay.
And there was some controversy that he died in his cell. He was hung in his cell supposedly, and there was controversy that if he killed himself, his wife and daughter would get his estate and the money he was owed by the NFL. So the night before he was found dead, his wife had talked to him and said there was, no indicators that he was suicidal, said he loved you, yada, yada, yada. And then they found it the next day hung, supposedly. I just didn't follow that one. Now that you say that, I remember the story and I remember the controversy. This guy was the same guy that represented Casey Anthony. His attorney was Jose Baez.
Okay.
So
and I believe there's a lot of insurance money at stake, because if he's murdered, obviously there's probably a double indemnity clause or something in the insurance policy. If it's suicide, sometimes there's an outright exclusion. So
yeah, because he was busted for all of these mishaps in the middle of his NFL career. It wasn't like
I remember.
Simpson,
But I remember that was tragic. I mean, tragic whenever anything like that happens. I don't know enough about that one.
Okay.
The only reason that Jeffrey Epstein is, I think, so interesting to the public is it is another situation where the Clintons are involved.
Okay, yeah, that's another good one.
And I believe that the flight records that have just been subpoenaed are going to verify what's been leaking out little by little, that Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were frequent visitors of what do they call it? Pedophile Island or something like that.
Yeah, that's a new one the past couple weeks.
Yeah, along with a ton of other politicians on both sides of the aisle.
What do you think about that?
Disgusting.
I mean, do you think that that's true? The pedophile island thing is like, does that have some weight to it, or is that? So Epstein was a pedophile, correct?
I have heard that he was a sexual predator. Now, remember, pedophile means that you are sexually aroused by prepubescent children. I have seen no evidence of that. I have seen that girls that were under the age of legal consent were brought there.
To his place, his home, or?
To a number of different places in America, in other countries, and then this island.
Gotcha.
So,
and then the thing that we were talking about before that you go into is, so I guess, is it that the Clintons, whenever you rat out a Clinton or something, you end up dead a week later?
There's more than just a conspiracy there. If you're a friend of the Clintons, you have a high chance of dying mysteriously.
Okay.
So,
I've seen that. Like I said, I've seen that a little bit.
Vince Foster.
Okay.
I mean, completely inexplicable, quote unquote, suicide. Read about Vince Foster's death. It's enough to.
Vince Foster?
Yeah, he was the personal attorney of Hillary Clinton for the Whitewater. I mean, this is probably before your time, yes. But read up about the suicide of Vince Foster or the McDougalls. It's kind of scary, actually.
Yeah. So these people are dying whenever they turn against them, or just after they...
I don't think they get a chance to. That's the whole idea.
So before it could get ugly,
They're gone.
So what's a crazy theory of yours? You think that they hire people to kill them? Is that what you think?
Yeah, I don't think they do it themselves. No.
But they're paying someone to put them away?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, it is. And I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but there's just too many unanswered questions. When I heard Jeffrey Epstein, quote unquote, committed suicide, I just about busted out laughing because it was, okay, that's completely consistent.
We kind of trace back. That's interesting, by the way. I wasn't dodging that, but trace back to we talked about Aaron Hernandez and you know how Jose Baez was his attorney, who also represented Casey Anthony. I was going to ask two questions. One, how does a guy someone get high profile like that, where you know he represents one person and it goes crazy, and then he starts getting celebrities, or he's so successful at getting murderers off, and then two, or finding murderers not guilty, and then two, how do they decide what cases are televised so largely? So obviously, like O.J. Simpson, Aaron Hernandez, that's different. They're football players. But who was Casey Anthony, and why was her stuff on TV?
Well, I believe Casey Anthony killed her child.
Yes.
Okay.
They found her in a swamp like 3 miles from her house.
Yeah. So the policy that is going to dictate whether or not a trial is televised is going to be the local court rules of that jurisdiction. So that's different everywhere.
That was in Florida, so.
Yeah, right. So in Florida, you must be able to do that. Here, they don't do that. Then what was your other question?
What was my other question? I guess.
How do you get to be a high-profile criminal defense attorney?
Yeah, that was probably his wake and break.
Yeah, you knock a few out of the park and have somebody hire somebody for PR to publicize that. It's not hard. And keep this in mind. I have a lot of very dear friends who I respect that are prosecutors. It's hard to convict somebody in a criminal case because all of the buys go to the defendant. Our whole criminal justice system is based on letting 1,000 guilty men go free, you know, before you convict even one innocent person. And even though we have all of these built-in biases, you know, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, it's not that hard as a criminal defense attorney to create doubt in a prosecutor's case. So I think that the lawyering and trial skills of defense attorneys get way, way overblown. I have a lot more respect for prosecutors that beat them because, man, they earn their money. They do. It's a lot harder to win a case as a prosecutor than a defense attorney.
These are only things I see on documentaries, which can be, you know, persuade you one way or read online. But with that case, or with that statement, that says we have, I think, something ridiculous like 25% of the world's prisoners, and we're only 5% of the world's population in America. Is that true?
Yeah, I've heard statistics like that. But you know what? That just means that we take law and order and the rule of law much more seriously than the rest of the country. And so that is a fact.
You don't think that's like a flawed statistic?
Well,
that's alarming per se.
Well, would you rather kill them? I mean, that's what they do in Saudi Arabia. When I was stationed there for Desert Storm, I was a logistics officer, so I spent a lot of time in the port of Dammam and Dhahran and things like that. The Khobar Towers, one of them was blown up by terrorists. We had a place there that we operated out of. But about a block away from there was this little building, what would I say, maybe about the size of the Hub bar. I mean, that's not a big bar.
Okay.
Every Friday it was emptied, and they cut off hands, and they poked out eyes, and they beheaded people, and they emptied it out until the next week. Okay.
Why?
Because that's how they mete out punishment under Sharia.
These were any crimes?
Yeah, theft usually results in some body part being amputated, and your more serious crimes, adultery, you're killed, and they do it every Friday.
What about it like a more civilized nation that, you know, somewhere in the UK or whatnot? Are their prison systems pretty comparable to us, or are we?
I don't know enough about other countries' prison systems to render. That's the only. I became a student of Sharia when I was.
Because you were working it.
I was, yeah. I wanted to know what makes these Islamofascists tick. So I read the Quran in English. So, your Islamofascist is going to say, no, you didn't read the Quran because you can't read Arabic. Okay. I don't read Arabic. I read a translated version of the Quran because I wanted to find out why do these people act like that. But then you have the Quran, and then you have several other lesser books. I think one's called the Hadith, and they tell you how you handle society.
You think there's a direct correlation in the way things were ran and reading in the Quran? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so you have Islamic law being carried out by Islamofascists, and they like to kill people and cut body parts off. I would rather put someone in a cage.
Yeah, I mean that's a valid point. So, we'll go to another question real quick. Some of these are going to be pretty generic, so I'm sure you've asked them thousands of times. But what would you say is the hardest part of your job being a criminal defense attorney? And then, are there cases where you ever feel like there is no true justice?
The hardest part. It's really sad when when an innocent person gets charged because it destroys their life. It's something that you never recover from. You're always going to have that mark on you, especially in the days of digital storage. You're never going to get it off your criminal record, even if because it's going to show you were charged with this and then the case was dismissed. And
so even if you were innocent, you still have that guilty trail behind you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to follow you around your whole life. That's very tragic. And the worst cases that I've ever seen, and I've had more than I care to ever have. I'd be happy to never get another one, where a minor child makes a spurious allegation against a parent for vindictive purposes, and that parent never recovers.
That happens quite a bit.
Yes, unfortunately it does.
Okay, that was good. Had another person ask, which we were talking about marijuana, so this is good.
Okay.
How does it work if you have a concealed handgun carrier defending himself, but also happens to have a medical marijuana card?
He's golden.
He's fine.
Oh yeah,
as long as you got your card.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's every state, or it depends?
No, it's different in every state.
Well, that was a dumb question. Yeah.
Yeah, so. In North Dakota, we don't have concealed carry permits. You can concealed carry in North Dakota, which is a beautiful thing. I think that the Second Amendment gets stomped on way too much in America, and we need to protect that, because the second, and I got to step back, because the first time that somebody told me that the Second Amendment was to protect us from the government, my jaw hit the ground, and I'm thinking, what? Why would the government ever come? Because I was a youngster, and I'm thinking that the government is there to protect us, and it's a good thing, and we should support the government. But no, sometimes governments lose their way and they oppress their people. And the Second Amendment is to keep the people prickly and make them hard to oppress and take over. And we're headed for a showdown. I hope it doesn't come to another civil war, but the have-nots are trying to take away something that they haven't earned from the haves, and I wouldn't want to be one of the have-nots, because they're not going to win this. It's not even going to be a fair fight.
Yeah, it's scary to think about.
Yeah, it is.
Let's see. And I was going to ask about that too, because I see a lot of people talking about the government oppressing us and kind of moving in without us knowing. And it's this huge debate on, does the mask work? Does the mask not? Can they make us wear it? That drives me crazy because that's all people talk about right now. But do you think that is a form of the government oppressing us by making us wear? You do?
Yeah, I do.
Why is that?
Because wearing a mask to prevent yourself from getting COVID is like putting up a chain link fence around your backyard to keep out mosquitoes.
Okay.
And that's a fact.
See, I never know what to believe because I have family and friends who are medical professionals that say it works, and then I have friends that say there's no way it works. I never know what to believe anymore.
Okay, so I do have a little specialized knowledge in this area. In addition to being a lawyer, I was a medical service corps officer in the Army my entire 34 years. Okay. So we have a place called USAMRIID, United States Army. What is it all? It's been so long since I've been down there.
Yeah, another crazy.
The Infectious Disease Institute. That's what it is. Then it's run by the Army.
And where was that at?
Is it in Maryland, I believe?
Okay.
So if you look at the size of what this coronavirus is and ask yourself, if you blew through one of these cloth masks that you see all these idiots wearing when they're driving in a car by themselves, it's not going to stop coronavirus from coming through the mask. That is, anybody that tells you that is lying right to your face. That's just false. If you want to protect yourself from coronavirus, go see what the research scientists wear in a level 4 containment area.
So probably
that's what you need.
A full suit with gloves and
absolutely
like a biosuit.
Yeah. And is that what we're going to do? No. The other thing is that if you are a healthy person with no pre-existing medical conditions, you have almost a statistically 0% chance of dying from this. I'm not saying you're not going to get it, but statistically almost zero.
Do you think our government enforcing masks is a form of oppression, or do you think it's because they're uneducated and scared?
I think they're ignorant. They're ignorant.
Because I see a lot of people saying it's just a mask. They're going to make us wear a mask, and the next it's going to be just this. And I didn't know if you thought it was because it's something new and we're uneducated, or if you truly think that it's a move towards more government control.
No, I don't think that there's a man behind the curtain type thing. I think that it's just basic ignorance. I think that you can explain a whole lot of nonsense from stupidity versus evil in the world. There's just a lot of dumbasses out there.
Sure.
And they're in positions of authority.
We talked a little bit about this before we started the show, but you got a client who's guilty with a major crime and you know or believe he is guilty. What do you do? I know you mentioned you can pass it off, or what are you doing for that guy?
If somebody wants to hire me for a case and I'm just uncomfortable with it, I'll decline representation on it.
And then it goes down the ladder to public defense.
Well, if somebody walks in my door and they want to retain me for a case that I don't want, I don't care where they go.
You just say no and they're out.
They're out. Yeah.
What about the guy who does get them? He gets bumped down. What are because surely you had some of these cases as when you were younger, correct?
Yeah. I suppose the first child porn case that I got, which turned my stomach, I was appointed in federal court by the federal judge. I didn't want that case, and I called him, and he said, "Ward, somebody's got to do these cases. I need you to do this."
Asking for you to buckle down and take it.
This is that was Judge Rodney Webb, who was one of the finest lawyers I think that ever came out of the University of North Dakota School of Law. So I took it, and it still haunts me to this day. I mean, that's just something that is completely and utterly disgusting. And if I have anything to say, I will not take another child porn case. They're just too hard on a person. I mean, they steal part of your soul.
Sure. So that was your one and done with that. You never had any more.
I had a couple others that came up in the midst of representing a primary charge, and then as the investigation went on, some child porn was found. You're just kind of screwed there because you're already on the hook for the other stuff. You as a defense attorney make a decision along with your client early on in any criminal representation. Are you wanting me to represent you because you're innocent and you didn't do this? Or are you wanting me to represent you because you did do this and you want to make sure that you get the least amount of jail time, the smallest fine that there is possible in the situation? By far, over 90% of the criminal representation that I do. Turn this off. What you're doing is you have an agreement with the client early on that, yeah, we're going to do discovery. We're going to, file all the motions to suppress and all that, because what you're going to try to do in the meantime is negotiate a plea agreement for either a lesser charge or a more desirable sentence.
I think someone that led into a good question that someone asked: is it more important, or is it easier to get someone not guilty, or take a plea deal and move on if it's going to drag out?
Well, a not guilty means you've went through a complete jury trial, so that's a lot of work. And it's very expensive. And so that's one of the things that I discuss with a potential criminal client is, look, if you're hiring me to do a defense on a AA, that's going to cost you maybe $100,000.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think that's why a lot of people are, I don't know, put away prematurely or take plea deals because they don't have the money to afford service?
I imagine that happens. It's not ever happened in my experience.
How much is the average attorney? I mean, for a criminal defense attorney, is it off the wall vary by?
Yeah, it varies because, we don't belong to a union or anything, and your younger attorneys that are hungrier are going to do it for less, and your more experienced ones that have, half a dozen murder trials and, 20 or 30 serious felony trials. You win a few big cases in state court, federal court, you're going to be in demand. And if you're a younger attorney right out of law school, you're going to try to undercut the old dogs and try to steal some of that business away from them. And that's just going to be the yin and yang as you mature as an attorney.
Yeah. This is a question that you probably need a lot more research on and talk about off record. But so if you have any advice on it or any intake, let me know. If not,
sure. Yeah.
But so someone confesses blatantly immediately after happening for first degree murder, then they post bail. Is that common to have bail for first degree murder?
I've never seen that.
It might have been second degree. I had a distant cousin of mine, my mom's cousin, who was murdered by a woman, and she admitted it to the police when they got there. They were, I think there had been some alcohol involved, and she was at their house, and she admitted to shooting him for no reason, and she looked pretty strung out, her pictures and whatnot, but she was free, I want to say, the next morning.
Okay.
How does that work?
Well,
is that common?
Well,
I'd have to pull up how much her bail and stuff was, but it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, not knowing the actual specifics, because a bail hearing is a very involved part of the procedural and substantive due process that a criminal client is entitled to. And one of the things that you have to do is find out the background and as much about the situation. If it's a domestic, most domestic murders, somebody that that's the only murder you're ever going to commit in your life. It's not like you're a hitman or you're an enforcer for a cartel and your job is to whack people. And especially if it wasn't premeditated murder where you planned this out.
I misquoted it
'Kay.
quite a bit, which
All
is unlike, or just like me, but it was $100,000 bond after
Okay.
after she admitted to shooting him.
That's
and
pretty high.
That is high.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Sure.
My family was pretty shocked by it, and she's
Mm-hmm.
still free. She's going through it's made so many courts, and I think she is due September in the final court that she can get through. I think it got
Mm-hmm.
pretty high.
Okay, remember one of the functions of granting or of setting bail is to ensure that they attend all of the subsequent hearings and trial processes. That's what you're supposed to do. If this person is not a flight risk and there's not a high likelihood that they're going to commit a crime again, most judges are going to let them out as long as they have that financial hold on them. You know, $100,000 is a lot of money. Most people aren't going to want to give that up.
And so she would not be considered high risk, even though
Well, has she committed murders prior? I mean, if she has a prior history, that's going to be taken into account by the judge. If she's been law-abiding up till that point, they're probably going to be given reasonable bail.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about it other than that. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't lived close to them in a while. And
Yeah.
then,
I mean, if I was a judge and I thought setting a reasonable bail, you know, 100,000-300,000, because they usually have to come up with 10%, is going to ensure that they're going to be there, I'm going to give them bail because they're not convicted. They're supposed to be treated as though they are innocent at that time because they have not been proven guilty yet. The reason that you would
what if she admitted to guilt at the scene?
yeah,
That's still not guilty.
Admitting that you did it doesn't mean that you're a premeditated murderer. She might have admitted to something that she claimed was a defensive, justifiable homicide.
Okay, I see it from that point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know, if you're defending yourself, you can kill somebody.
Yeah, none of us were there, so I
Mhm.
have no
Yeah.
idea. And there's a lot of questions as to why she was even there too. So I
So
see it from that viewpoint,
from what the prosecution says and what the defense attorney says, that judge might have said, "Look, justifiable homicide, high likelihood here. I'm going to grant bail."
I think she's been biding her time well, getting off and doing a lot of mistrials. But I think in September, it'll probably turn out the way that my family's been looking at. So
okay.
So what are some? You talked about it in class a little bit. I guess some common pointers and tips for someone who's been accused of a crime or arrested.
Well, the first thing you do is you don't say anything.
Don't say a word.
No, don't say anything other than "I want a lawyer." That's it. You're always going to be they're going to try to encourage you to quote unquote cooperate.
Which means what?
Well, from their point of view, it means incriminate yourself.
Start talking.
Yeah, they want you to talk. And as a criminal defense attorney, that's the last thing that you want to do. They're smart. Detectives are trained to try to get incriminating statements out of you. And most defendants are too smart by half. And they say something sometime when they think that they're not doing any harm, that there is going to come back and they're going to use it against them. So just don't say anything. Tell them you want a lawyer. That's it.
Rule number 1, don't talk.
That's right.
Okay. What else?
That's it.
That's it.
That's the second rule and third rule and fourth rule.
That's all you got. Just ask for your lawyer.
Yeah. It's a very simple thing.
What about
when they say you have the right to remain silent, you should listen to them.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
What about whenever you talked about the polygraph in class a little bit?
Yeah, the polygraph.
It's bogus.
Yeah, it's if it was actually science and it worked, you'd be able to use it as evidence in a courtroom. You can't.
How do you, as maybe a potential criminal or anybody that's on a polygraph, they say you fail it as, before you had told me that if someone said you'd fail the polygraph, I'd feel helpless. I didn't know what to do. You were like, no, it's bogus. So you're like, Justin, you failed the polygraph. You're not hired for this job or you're going to jail. What do you say?
Well, when you say you failed a polygraph, first of all, I'd want to know who the polygraph operator is. What are their biases? How was the how did the session go? What were the questions answered? Most people that are caught off guard and are kind of fidgety are going to fail polygraphs.
They're already on edge when you go in. So.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a nervous Nelly, you're going to fail a polygraph. That's just the way it is.
And so,
why do we have them?
Yeah, why are they still relevant?
Because luckily for law enforcement, nobody knows that, and so law enforcement uses polygraphs to find out, okay, who's willing to take a polygraph. That, in my opinion, if you're willing to take a polygraph, that says a lot.
You can decline it?
Well, yeah. But if somebody comes in and says, you know what, I'll take a polygraph, they don't know that polygraphs are just witch doctory. They think that it's a lie detector test. Well, they're not.
Is there a difference in the two?
No, that's just the vernacular name. A polygraph is called a lie detector. Yeah. No, polygraphs are not lie detectors. All they do...
That's what they were known to be.
Yeah. What a polygraph does is it checks blood pressure, it checks pulse, it checks... Some have galvanometers that check whether you're perspiring number. What they're looking for are...
like abnormal movements and...
just systemic responses to questions. Well, some people have those systemic responses and they're completely innocent. And sociopaths don't have them because they don't have a conscience.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. And you talked a little bit about drug sniffing dogs too.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate more on, because I don't want to misquote you before we dive into it. So,
we used drug sniffing dogs that weren't really drug sniffing dogs when we ran aerial ports of embarkation and debarkation, because what you want is people to use the amnesty boxes, and if they see that there's dogs there,
they're just going to give it up.
They're going to give it up because they can go behind a screen, throw the junk in there, and then they're clean.
You were looking for drugs or weapons or
all
everything?
all the time. Yeah.
So is that pretty common in civilian side? And
I don't know. That was my experience, because an actual trained drug dog is hard to come by.
Really?
It takes time. They are not, a police dog in and of itself isn't going to be a drug dog.
Do you think that those are used on the streets inappropriately or illegally?
Like what, to attack people?
No.
Oh.
You say sometimes they're not real drug sniffing dogs. Do you think people...
Oh.
We're going to search your car with a dog.
Oh, okay. Well, if I have a client call and say that a dog alerted, I'm going to want to see that dog is really a certified dog.
And you do that?
Oh, yeah.
And then
and I have had occasion where that was, Roxy, the German Shepherd, that was just the family pet.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what happens then? The case is gone?
Yeah. It's excluded. You can't do that. They have to be real drug sniffing dogs.
But that does happen more often than you think?
Well, it's twice I've seen that.
What about the guys in Minneapolis with the George Floyd stuff? What do you think is going to happen to them?
Who?
The cops. Or, there's one guy who was...
Yeah, I don't know, because I haven't seen the whole video. All I've seen is where George Floyd is standing up and there's police around him, and then I've never seen how he gets from standing up to the guy with his knee on his neck. Now, do I think the cop should have had his knee on his neck? Absolutely not. Absolutely the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's seen that. He said he goes from point A to point B.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any tape. Of course, there's all kinds of other tape before and after, but then that is gone. So.
I'm interested in what happened in between those two times, and what did George Floyd do? Did he do something that would justify using an extreme and prejudicial force? Who knows? I don't know yet.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, too, that they had allegedly worked together part-time.
Yeah, they knew each other.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
as the case goes on and stuff, you find stuff forever. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if you had any thoughts on what was going to happen to that guy or the team that was with him.
I just don't know enough about the granularity of the facts to say.
Let's see. I'm going to pull up some more questions. How do you deal with victims' rights such as Marcy's Law?
With regard to...
It just says, deal with victims' rights such as Marcy's Law in their cases. And I'm not sure I even know what Marcy's Law is.
Well, that's supposed to protect victims from intrusion from their attackers, or the criminal that it is being charged for victimizing the witness. Because, of course, if somebody is a victim, they're not the one charging them, it's the state.
Gotcha.
I fully support that. I've never had a case where Marcy's Law got in the way of me defending my client, so I don't see a problem with Marcy's Law at all.
Gotcha. Yeah, before you said that, I don't think I knew what Marcy's Law was.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any high-profile cases that you watched growing up that you think that the decision was incorrect, that were not so blatant? Like, I've read into the O.J. Simpson books and watched all those. I clearly think he's guilty. I mean, I could be wrong. I'm not an attorney.
Okay,
but
I lived through the O.J. Simpson. I watched it on TV every day.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was very interested in what was going on, and I was completely and thoroughly disgusted with law enforcement's behavior. And O.J. Simpson got away with murder because the investigators cheated and they got caught. And that's, in my opinion, what happened. I think Mark Furman should have been charged with tampering with evidence. I thought the judge in the case was a complete idiot. Allowed shenanigans and nonsense in a court like I've never seen ever since that. I've been in courtrooms for 33 years and I have never seen attorneys behave like that. I thought Marsha Clark was a complete moron.
do you think a lot of this has a correlation to the fact that it is streamed on TV, or do you think it's
No.
just idiots got a hold of it?
Yeah, it was probably funny to the defense team, really, because the defense team were seasoned professional lawyers and the prosecutors in this case were just idiots. And I don't know what they're doing now, but that was not a good showing for how to prosecute a case. And just the inconsistencies in the investigation and how, they took O.J. Simpson's blood so that they could have an exemplar of it to compare it to what was found here, there, and everywhere. And there was blood missing out of his vial that couldn't be accounted for. And then after the crime scene investigators, after the criminologists left, they came back and found more blood. Okay? Somebody's doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And it just disgusted me, because I want to put criminals behind bars just as much as the next, but you can't cheat and you can't break the law. You got to do it by the rules. That's our system. And if you're not willing to comply with that, then you shouldn't be in law enforcement, because there are going to be guilty people that get away with murder.
Yeah.
Learn to live with it.
Did you follow the Casey Anthony stuff much?
That case just weirded me out. I didn't. I mean, I watched it come on news and, got disgusted, but no, I didn't follow it, the forensics of it, like I did OJ.
And you're saying whenever things are streamed on TV, it's a state by state thing, and people just like request it because it's so high scale?
I've actually had cases where the media made motions and they were denied. They wanted to have cameras in the courtroom, and no, they were told no.
Yeah, like I know with the Aaron Hernandez one, I followed pretty heavily because I'm a big football fan, and then of course I read his books. I read one from, I want to say it was John Grisham.
Mm-hmm.
Who mainly does fiction, but then I also read it from Jose Baez's view, just to kind of see where it says. And naturally, he claims that he was innocent, but just was always curious why some make it to TV and why they don't, aside from being celebrities, because OJ and Aaron were celebrity football players.
Mm-hmm.
Casey Anthony, I don't think anyone ever heard of her until
No.
this happened. So, and I don't know that there's been another high-profile one on TV like that since.
Right. Yeah, I personally don't think that they should be televised because I think it encourages antics that are contrary to good order and discipline and the justice system that go on.
Yeah, it seems like as soon as high-profile cases on TV, like everything in America, people just start splitting. And
well, they
taking a
showboat.
50-50. Yeah,
they showboat. And I guess I was taught by my mentor, Kevin Spaeth, that you don't talk to the media no matter how much you want to. Just walk by and say no comment and tell your client to say no comment and just leave it at that. You don't try your case in the media. That's just the wrong thing to do.
Have you worked on, I'm sure you have, on some pretty high-profile cases yourself that probably would have been made good news? Or
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you give us an example or two of that, or is that proprietary?
Well, like you want the case name or?
I guess maybe just for people who might listen, just a big case that you got or something that was pretty devastating.
Well, I did a murder case back in the 90s where I won't say the name, but my client was accused of shooting his best friend in the head with a .22, and he absolutely didn't do it. And in the course of the trial and investigation, I hired private investigator Ross Rolshoven. He owns Great Plains Claims. He's an awesome investigator. Ross's investigation was able to affirmatively show who actually the murderer was. So, the state's attorney, unfortunately, or the BCI, whoever was in charge, that's Bureau of Criminal Investigation, made a decision as to who did it and then tried to find evidence that supported their theory when it was pretty obvious that this other guy had done it. And the jury deliberated for, an hour. It was a 2-week trial. Not guilty.
Sounds pretty easy on your part. Sounds like you did your job.
Well, not easy, but I mean, whenever you go up against the state or the federal government, you've got your work cut out for you because you have the power of basically an unlimited budget when you're like going up against the DEA and the FBI, ATF. They have millions.
A lot of resources and money. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm pretty good as far as that, unless you have anything else you want to add.
No, a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you coming on, and hopefully the people enjoy the pointers you gave and whatnot. So
perfect.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, have a good one.